The wind came down from the butt as sharp as a knife and rolled across the high plains like it meant to scrape the land clean. It cut through the sagging fence posts, rattled the blackened skeletons of cottonwoods, and bit into Silas Langford's skin without apology. He stood beside a half-buried trough hammer in hand, jaw clenched. The nail bent sideways again. He tossed the hammer into the snow. His breath steamed in the cold. There was no sound but the wind and the dry, creaking groan of old wood swaying. Even the cattle were quiet, hunched in tight clusters near the far edge of the field, their hides coated in hoarfrost. He watched them for a long time, eyes stinging. Not from grief, not from anything he could name, just from the kind of rawness that grows in a man when every voice worth hearing is long gone. The barn loomed behind him, red paint peeled and weathered gray. Its doors hung crooked like a mouth too tired to close. A pair of gloves lay frozen to the porch rail, stiff as bark. He hadn't been inside the house since the last hard freeze. Coffee tins cluttered the kitchen counter. A cracked photograph faced the wall. Nothing waited for him in there but the echo of his own boots. He hadn't meant to come back to the ranch. But after the war and the drift, after the years of not calling anything home, he had nowhere else to go. His father was buried out by the creek now. His brother gone 6 years before that. Only the land remained, and it held no warmth. Just dirt and ice and cattle with more sense than men. That morning he'd found another fence-down wire snarled in the brush like a warning. Wolves had been sighted again, too close. Another winter storm was coming. He thought he saw movement near the rise, something too small to be a deer. He narrowed his eyes. A figure, human, walking straight through the snowfield, stumbling now and again. He squinted against the glare. A woman, coat too thin, scarf slipping down from her face, and following behind her small shapes. Children. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. She kept coming slowly, like someone who had already walked too far to stop. The youngest child, maybe 3, was crying. The oldest was trying not to. There were 4 of them all together. 4 small, cold children trailing behind one hollow-eyed woman who looked like she'd run out of prayers 2 towns back. They reached the edge of the yard where the snow turned to frozen mud. The woman lifted her chin. "I was told this place takes in hands for the season," she said, voice hoarse. "I'll work. The children won't be in the way." Silas looked at her. Looked at the 2 big boots on her feet, the torn hem of her skirt, the boy at her side trying to hold up the baby with one arm. "This isn't a place for," he started. "We've got nowhere else." Silas felt the words catch somewhere in his throat. The wind tugged at her coat like it wanted her gone. "There's the bunkhouse," he said, finally not looking at her. "It'll be cold. No stove yet. You can sleep there tonight. In the morning I'll see what's to be done." She nodded once, slow. Her eyes didn't soften. He turned and walked toward the barn without waiting. He didn't trust himself to speak again. That night he sat alone by the kitchen fire, watching the orange crackle fade to coal. Through the frost-streaked window he could just make out the shape of the bunkhouse. No smoke, no light. He thought of the girl's voice. Not the begging kind. The kind made of something harder than survival. Something like stone worn smooth from too many years of weather. He leaned back, chair creaking beneath him. The room was still, still as a churchyard. The picture frame on the shelf caught the firelight just enough to flash gold across the dust. He hadn't wanted a family. Never had. But he kept hearing the smallest one cry. The next morning broke slow and colorless sky, heavy with snow that had not yet fallen. The kind of sky that hung there like a threat, silent and full of weight. Silas stepped outside before first light boots crunching on the ice-crusted ground. His breath curled in front of him, then vanished like it had someplace better to be. He headed for the bunkhouse, lantern in hand. The door was ajar, just a crack, but the cold seeped out like breath from a sleeping mouth. He knocked once with his knuckles out of some habit he didn't remember choosing. Inside, the woman was already awake. She sat upright on the edge of a cot, her hair down, arms wrapped around the youngest child. The other three were curled up under a single quilt, faces barely visible. Her eyes met his like she'd been waiting. "I'll need work," she said quietly. "And food. We don't want handouts." Silas nodded. "You ever worked stock?" "I've washed sheets and bodies and floors. I've cleaned up after worse than cows." That gave him pause. "You from the territory?" "East of here," she said. "Long gone now." "What's your name?" She hesitated a second too long. "Nora." He let the silence hold. "You'll start in the kitchen. There's calves needing bottles. Fence mending if you've got the hands." "I do." He looked down at the children. "They'll need something warm." She stood. "Then I better start earning it." It was mid-morning before the sun broke through in streaks, lighting the frost along the fence lines. Nora moved through the yard like someone born to work, shoulders set, face unreadable. She didn't talk much, but she didn't pause either. Fed the calves without flinching. Hauled water like she'd done it 1,000 times. Her hands were raw by noon, her skirt soaked at the hem. But she never asked for rest. The children stayed near the porch, bundled in old coats Silas had dug from a chest in the barn. They played with sticks in the dirt, too quiet for their age. The oldest, a boy named Eli, watched everything. Every move Nora made, every glance from Silas, like he was keeping count. Later, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and the light turned bruised and low, Silas brought wood to the bunkhouse. He knocked again. Nora opened the door, eyes sunken from the cold, but her voice was steady. "You said there's work fixing fence." "Tomorrow. I'll show you the line after breakfast." She nodded. "Thank you." He handed her the bundle of wood, and she took it without a word. Her fingers brushed his just barely dry and cracked, not soft like he'd imagined a woman's hand should be. But there was something in that touch. Not tenderness, just real. As he turned to leave, Eli's voice came from inside. "Mr. Langford." Silas paused. "Do wolves come here?" Silas looked over his shoulder. "Sometimes." "Why?" Ellie didn't blink. "I can help watch." He was just a child, but the way he said it carried weight. Like it wasn't the first time he'd had to stand between danger and his family. Silas gave a nod. "You'll need a dog first. Can't keep wolves off without one." Eli nodded back, solemn as a man grown. That night Silas lay in his own bed, listening to the creak of wind through the boards. The house felt less hollow somehow, like someone had filled it with breath again. Not warmth, not yet, but presence. He stared at the ceiling, the knot of the old beam above his bed, the place where he used to count cracks as a boy. He didn't know why he'd let them stay. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was the way Nora didn't ask for it. Or maybe it was the way the boy stood, like he meant to keep watch over things no child should have to. But the truth itched under his skin like a healing wound. He hadn't wanted company. Hadn't wanted anyone needing him. Yet here they were. And something in him had shifted. Another dawn waits ahead. Subscribe to see it. Snow came the next day, not heavy but enough to blur the edges of the world. It drifted down soft and constant, covering the pastures and the sagging porch roof, clinging to the wire fences like lint on old cloth. Silas rose early again, this time with 2 mugs of coffee. One he left on the bunkhouse step. By the time he reached the west fence line, Nora was already there. She stood beneath a cottonwood, stripped of every leaf, gloved hands clutching a length of barbed wire, a coil resting at her feet. She turned when she heard his boots. "You come early," he said. You said you'd show me the line. I meant after breakfast. I already had mine. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. There was something in the set of her jaw that said she was done being late for anything in this life. Silas handed her a pair of better gloves and nodded to the fence. Posts run down to that ravine. About 3 miles. She picked up the coil. Show me where to start. They worked in silence for a while. Wind whispered through the dry grass beneath the snow, and a pair of crows cut across the pale sky. Silas glanced at her now and then, at the way she handled the tools without complaint, the quick, efficient way her hands moved. She didn't talk about herself, didn't complain about the cold. Her cheeks were wind-burned, but she stood straight. You worked land before, he asked. My father had a bit, mostly wheat. Died when I was 16. Your husband? No husband. Silas didn't ask more. Later, while pulling wire tight near a broken post, her hand slipped. The barb tore through her glove, slicing into her palm. She hissed and turned from him, gripping the wound. Let me see, he said, stepping close. It's fine. You're bleeding. She didn't move, so he took her hand gently. Her palm was cut not deep but raw, and the blood had already soaked through the wool. Her fingers trembled. Whether from cold or pain, he couldn't tell. He pulled a rag from his coat pocket and wrapped it without a word. When he was done, she didn't pull away. I can finish the line, she said. I know you can. Their eyes met. Not soft, not warm, just honest. That afternoon, Silas rode into town to fetch supplies. He picked up flour, beans, coffee. At the counter he hesitated, then added children's boots to the pile, 4 sizes, rough guesses. You hiring a family now, Langford? The shopkeeper asked. Silas didn't answer. When he got back, the children were in the barn, sitting on hay bales, watching a kitten stalk a bit of string. Eli stood guard near the door like he'd assigned himself the job. Silas set the boots down without explanation. Nora was feeding the stove in the bunkhouse. When she saw the parcel, she blinked once. They'll outgrow them quick, she said. Then they'll wear holes in them. She gave the faintest nod, then looked away. Her face didn't change, but something settled in her shoulders, something less like tension, more like weight shared. That night she stayed after supper to wash dishes in the main house. Silas dried. Neither spoke much, but the silence felt easier than before. She set the last plate down and wiped her hands. I know this can't last, she said. Winter'll end. So will your kindness. He didn't look at her. I don't give what I mean to take back. The wind pressed against the windows. Somewhere outside the cattle lowed slow and deep. I don't want charity, she said. This isn't charity. She met his eyes, tired, proud, unflinching. Then she nodded once and left without another word. After she was gone, Silas stood by the stove long after the heat had faded, hands resting on the counter, eyes on nothing. He didn't know what this was turning into, but he knew it wasn't nothing. The thaw came slow. First the drip of meltwater from the barn eaves, then the soft give of earth beneath boot heels. By mid-March the snow had faded to patches in the shade, and the roads turned to thick brown slush. Spring didn't arrive in any hurry out here. It crept in like it was unsure it was wanted. Silas found himself walking with a kind of aimless purpose, always checking something: gates, feed bins, fence lines he knew hadn't moved. The truth was, he'd begun watching for her. For Nora. For the moment she'd come around the corner of the barn, sleeves rolled, face streaked with dust, that quiet fire still behind her eyes. She belonged now, somehow, without asking permission. Like sagebrush in the pasture or dust in the air. She'd taken on more than he asked, mucking stalls, tending calves, fixing the chicken wire. And the children, though still too quiet for their years, had begun to stretch out like plants finding sun. The smallest laughed once last week, loud enough to startle the mule. Silas had been standing near the porch and stopped dead when he heard it. That laugh hadn't belonged to this place. But now it did. One morning, as they loaded feed sacks into the wagon, Nora spoke without looking up. "I had a sister once. Lived down in Montrose. Haven't seen her in 5 years." Silas paused, then hoisted another sack. "She's still alive." "I don't know." A beat of silence passed between them. Then she added, "She married young, left me behind with our mother." That was before things got hard. He didn't ask what hard meant. The way she said it left no space. He glanced at her hands, still wrapped from time to time, still raw around the edges. But steady. Always steady. "You ever think of leaving here?" she asked. He looked toward the hills. "Once." "Why didn't you?" "No place worth going." Nora nodded. The horses pawed at the dirt beside them. Later that week he found her in the north field, standing in a patch of last year's grass, eyes closed. The wind moved her hair across her cheek. She didn't hear him approach. "You all right?" She opened her eyes. "It's the first day it smells like something might grow again." Silas looked around. The trees were still bare, the grass brittle and brown. But there was something in the air, wet, rich, the smell of things breaking open underground. "I never wanted a man," she said quietly. "Not after everything. Thought I didn't need one. Thought I was right." He said nothing. "But I see the way Eli watches you. Like you're something to measure himself by. Like maybe he could grow up different than what he's seen." Silas swallowed, throat tight. "He's a good boy. He wants to be." She looked at him, then really looked. "You scare him a little." "I scare everyone a little." Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." The sky was shifting above them, pale streaks of light breaking through the overcast. She turned toward the barn, then stopped. "I'm not looking to be saved," she said. "I'm not offering salvation." "Good." She walked away, boots crunching on thawing earth. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, a single lamp burning, the house too still. Outside the wind had softened. Somewhere near the creek a coyote called. He got up, went to the shelf, and pulled down the old ledger where his father used to keep account of every cow born, every acre seeded. He flipped to a blank page and wrote a name across the top in neat block letters, Langford Ranch. Then beneath it he wrote 4 more. In the morning he would show it to her. He didn't know if she'd stay, but if she did, he wanted her to know this wasn't temporary. This wasn't pity. This was the beginning of something planted deep, not soft, not sweet, but strong. Something that might grow. The days stretched longer. Shadows shrank. The world began to stir. Green shoots pushed up through the old straw behind the barn. The chickens laid more regular. Calves tested their legs, bucking clumsily across the fields. There were still cold nights, still mornings that smelled of frost, but something in the rhythm of the place had changed. Silas saw it in small things. The children's coats hanging in a row on the porch, dried from last night's rain. The tin cups lined neatly in the sink after supper, not left for him to find in the morning. The soft hum Nora made when she swept just under her breath, not meant for anyone to hear. One evening he found Eli out back with a hammer too big for his hand, trying to fix the broken chicken crate. "You're holding the nail too close," Silas said. Eli didn't look up. "I don't want it to split." "It won't." "Let me show you." The boy stepped back, jaw tight. Silas knelt beside him and took the hammer, slow, guiding Eli's hand over his. "See, angle it like this. Let the weight do the work." Eli watched, eyes narrowed. Then he nodded once and took over. The next nail went in clean. Later, Nora found them still out there, crouched beside the crate, hands dirty, the hammer between them. She didn't speak, just watched for a moment, then turned away with something unreadable in her face, like grief caught off guard by a bit of peace. That night, they all ate together in the main house for the first time. Silas set the table without thinking. Nora brought stew hot and thick with potatoes and what little meat they had left. The children were quiet at first, but as the fire warmed the room, the youngest began to chatter about a bird she'd seen with red wings. Silas listened. He didn't speak much. He didn't have to. Afterward, Nora helped him clear the dishes. The children had gone quiet in the corner, curled against each other in a nest of quilts. "You don't say much," she said softly, rinsing a plate. "Never saw the point unless something needed saying." She handed him the dish. Their hands touched. This time she didn't pull away. "I used to talk all the time," she said, "back when there was someone listening." He dried the plate. "I hear you?" The words landed heavier than he meant, and she looked at him, not startled, just searching. "I never wanted this," she said. "Any of it. The running, the raising, the begging." He nodded. "Neither did I." Her voice dropped. "But I think we're not running now." The room felt still then. Not empty. Just quiet in the way a home is when it's full of breath and sleeping children and nothing threatening the door. "I put your names in the book," Silas said after a long pause. "The ledger." She turned to him, brows low. "Why?" "Because this isn't a favor. It's yours now, same as mine." She stared at him, silent. Her throat moved like she was swallowing something sharp. "Say it again," she whispered. "It's yours." A tear slipped down her cheek. Not sudden, not dramatic. Just a small break in a wall held up too long. She nodded once, like that one word was enough to bear the weight of everything she'd carried. Outside, the wind shifted direction, warm and full of spring. Inside, the house held its silence like a promise. The first storm of spring came without warning, angry, wet, and fast. It rolled over the hills like a bruised black clouds, curling low thunder, grumbling deep in the gut of the sky. Rain hit hard and sideways, turning dry earth into sludge within minutes. Silas was out near the creek when the wind changed. He felt it in his chest before he saw the clouds, that old instinct from boyhood, something's coming. He turned the horse hard and galloped back toward the ranch, heart tight in his throat. When he reached the yard, Nora was already herding the children inside the barn skirts, whipping around her legs, hair plastered to her face. Eli had the smallest one on his hip and was yelling something she couldn't hear over the wind. Silas jumped down before the horse had stopped moving. "Get them to the back stall. It's dry there." She didn't ask questions, just nodded once and ran. Lightning split the sky wide open. The air stank of ozone and wet dust. Silas turned to bolt the barn doors as the rain came in sheets hard enough to sting. For a moment the world shrank to sound, thunder, hoofbeats, his own ragged breath. Then something different, a low, frightened bellow. From the southern pasture. The cattle. He didn't think. Just ran. The herd had broken the fence line, spooked by the storm pressing against the far gate. Mud sucked at his boots as he sprinted across the field, rain blinding. One wrong move and they'd bolt straight into the ravine. He reached the gate and threw his weight against it, bracing with everything he had. The lead steer reared up, eyes wide and rolling, ready to charge. "Go on," Silas growled through his teeth. "Try me." The thunder cracked overhead, deafening. Then behind him another shout. "Nora." She came through the rain, soaked to the bone, a long stick in her hand. She didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She moved slow, sure, spreading her arms wide, guiding the cattle with calm, steady steps like she'd done it her whole life. Together they held the line. By the time the storm passed, both were trembling with cold breath, coming in clouds. The cattle were penned. The gate held. Silas looked at her, mud streaked across her cheek, hands bleeding again. Her eyes locked on his, fierce and alive. "You're a damn fool," she said. He laughed. "Couldn't help it. Takes one to marry one." She blinked. "Is that what you're asking?" He stepped closer, close enough to smell the storm in her hair. "I'm not asking yet." "Good," she said, but her voice had softened. "Ask me when the mud dries." That night, after the children were asleep in the loft and the wind had quieted, they sat on the porch together, wrapped in borrowed quilts, steam rising from tin mugs of coffee. Her hand rested on his knee, easy and unforced. "You didn't have to come after the herd," she said. "I didn't have to do a lot of things." The stars came out slow and few. The land glistened with rain, fresh and raw. "I used to think surviving was enough," she said, "that it was the same as living. And now—" She didn't answer right away, just leaned into him, her shoulder warm against his. "Now I know different." He looked down at her. "You ever wonder what comes next?" "All the time." He nodded. "We'll figure it out." From inside, a child stirred and sighed in sleep. Nora smiled. "You know," she said, voice quiet, "I think this land might love us back." Silas watched the horizon where dawn was just beginning to pale the edge of the world. "Yeah," he said, "I think it already does." Summer came in slow, golden waves. The land dried out in patches, dust curling up at the heels of boots, the sun baking the tin roof of the barn until it shimmered. Days began earlier, stretching long and full of sweat. But the work settled into rhythm, measured and known like breath. The children took to ranch life like roots to water. Eli shadowed Silas, now tall enough to hold the reins steady, quiet as ever, always watching. The others helped where they could, carrying eggs, chasing goats, falling asleep in the hay with dust on their cheeks and the warmth of the day still clinging to them. One afternoon, Silas found Nora out by the north pasture, kneeling beside a broken plow, grease on her forearms, hair tied back with a strip of old curtain. He watched her a moment from the edge of the fence, something rising in him, slow and thick. Not desire, not even love exactly. Something older than that. A knowing. She glanced up. "You're staring. Didn't know a person could fix that by hand. You just didn't try hard enough." He smiled, stepped over the rail and knelt beside her. "Let me help." They worked side by side in the heat, their shoulders brushing now and then, not shy anymore. At one point she paused, wiped her forehead and said, "You keep a good place." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said, "It's better now." She nodded, eyes on the bolts. "I know." Later, as the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the dirt, he took her hand and led her to the ridge above the pasture. Below them, the ranch spread out in golden hush, the barn, the garden, the field. Smoke rose from the chimney. A dog barked once, then stopped. The world felt full. Silas cleared his throat. "I don't have much," he said. "Not by town standards. Just this land, this house. These kids I didn't make, but I think I was meant to raise." Nora looked at him steady. "I'm not offering comfort. Or ease. I don't know how to do soft things. But I know how to stay. I know how to build." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "I want you to marry me," he said. "Not because you have to, because I do." A long moment passed. The wind picked up, rustling the grass around their boots. Nora didn't speak. She just leaned into him, wrapped her arms around his middle, and let her breath fall into his chest. He held her like that, watching the light fade. The wedding was quiet. No preacher, just a circle of neighbors and the sky wide overhead. Nora wore her mother's dress, cleaned and mended. Silas wore his father's coat. The children stood with them, Ellie holding his brother's hand. Afterward, they ate pie off tin plates and danced to a fiddle played by the Smith boy from down the road. No one said happily ever after. No one needed to. In the months that followed, they planted corn in the western field, built a second chicken coop, put in a swing from the cottonwood tree where the fence line bends. The bunkhouse became a schoolroom, 1 slate and 3 wobbly desks. And in the fall, when the air turned sharp again, Nora pressed his hand to her stomach one evening as they watched the leaves turn. He felt it then. New life. Not just in her, in the ground, in the house, in himself. What had been broken was no longer just mended, it had been made into something stronger. Not perfect, but whole. And when the first snow came again, soft as memory, it settled not on emptiness but on home. Subscribe and follow The Long Road West.